Hi everyone, Dr. McDown here. I'm wanting to talk to you a little bit today about what we call the stages of spelling development. And I have some little visuals for you, so we're going to talk through that. I just wanted to start by saying that there are lots of different models of the spelling stages by lots of different researchers. They all have a lot of similarities to them. So I always say just pick one. And the one that I like to use is the Invernizzi, Templeton, and Johnston model. And it ties in with their Words Their Way spelling assessment. And this is an old 6th edition. There's a 7th edition now that's really great. But so some of the visuals that I'm going to show you are out of this book, and I wanted to really encourage you to use this. If you're wanting to assess for the spelling stages, this is a great tool for that. It's a qualitative spelling assessment. It can be used for kindergarten through 12th grade. Today, we're not going to talk about the assessment itself. I just want to talk about this idea of these spelling stages and the fact that we all go through them. We, every person on the planet basically goes through these spelling stages. So all of us speaking English, we start out at one stage and we transition through these 5 stages. And so I'm going to pause for just a minute while I get the PowerPoint ready, and we'll look at some examples of what those stages are and how you can kind of identify by looking at writing samples and that kind of thing of what stage your child is in. So here we go. This is going to walk us through some examples of the 5 spelling stages as labeled by Invernizzi, Templeton, and Johnston model. So first of all, this is an example of the very beginning of the first stage, and it's called the early emergent stage. And what you'll notice about this particular stage, this is your very young writers and spellers. They're usually in the age 2 to 5 range. And it's very typical just to see lots of scribbling. This is something you see very young children doing lots of scribbling, and you think it doesn't have meaning, but it does. It has meaning to them. They just don't know how to communicate it in a way that you know how to read. So Haley wrote this story that's called All the Birdies. And I assume that all this scribbly stuff here is from the birdie flying around. And maybe this thing in the middle is its nest, or maybe it's the bird flying. I don't really know. But that's what Haley said it was. And this is, again, from the Words Their Way textbook. So that's an example of the early emergent stage. They're typically just random marks, scribbles. You're not going to even see anything that looks like a letter. Now, as they get a little bit farther into that stage, you'll notice that they're starting to differentiate between their picture and some random scribbly things that they're not letters yet, but they kind of look like they're trying to make letters. So this is a picture that was labeled cowboy by its author. And you can kind of see the little cowboy hats. And I think this is probably a rope. And I'm not sure what all these other things are. But then there's some random letters. So they're starting to realize at this middle emergent stage, they're still in the emergent stage, but they're starting to transition and progress. You can see that they're starting to understand that there should be other things besides just their drawing, that there are letters that represent the writing. They just don't know how to make them yet. And here's another example. This is a little bit more advanced. This child knows how to write her name, Cameron, and she says that she wrote the story Jasmine. You can kind of see Princess Jasmine here with her veil or whatever it is and her dress. And then you'll notice that she wrote some capital letters here. It's very common when they first start writing actual letters to write in capitals. And you'll notice that she does actually get a J there for Jasmine, but and an M for, in the word Jasmine. But then one thing that's very common in the middle of the emergent stage is for them to kind of have random letters that may or may not match with the word. So they may write graphemes that don't necessarily match the phonemes that we hear, right? The graphemes are the written letters, the written symbols, the phonemes are the sounds they're hearing. So she's saying Jasmine, and she maybe heard the J and the M sound, so she knew how to write those two letters, but she didn't know. So she just kind of writes some random letters. That's really common at that stage to have random letters. They may or may not have any correlation with the sounds in the word. And then, so that's still in the middle emergent stage. It's just a little bit more advanced than we saw on the cowboy one. And then last, at the end of this stage, at what we call the late emergent stage, you'll notice that they have several words in their repertoire that they can spell. And you also can see that they're using all capital letters still. You'll see here Emily. It looks like they're probably trying to spell Emily. And they're getting closer to having letters to match all the sounds. It's getting better. They're getting more words that they're able to spell on their own, because they probably asked their family a million times how to spell it and got practiced, right? So this is what we would see at the end of the emergent stage. And then at the second stage, so the first stage was the emergent. The second stage, well, I forgot I put this in here. This is just kind of showing you the transition through these four parts of the stage. This is all emergent, but you can see how it transitions from just scribbles to starting to kind of get some little random squiggles that look like they might be trying to write letters, to actually being able to write letters, to being actually able to write a small bank of words and put more sounds, more graphemes to the phonemes they're hearing in the words. So you can really see that transition here. So that's all in stage one, the early emergent, or the emergent stage, spelling stage. Now we're transitioning. This is the second stage, and it's called the letter name alphabetic stage. This is in the early part of the stage. And typically the students that are in the letter name alphabetic stage are usually around the range of 4 to 7 years old. Typically, this is what you see at kindergarten and early first grade, these kinds of spellers. One of the reasons they call this the letter name alphabetic stage is because early on, the students literally are using the letter names to help spell the words. So if you haven't figured out what this says yet, it says Ellie loves Meg. This is a letter from a little girl to her big sister. And it says, when are you coming? Right? I'll let you soak that in for a minute. Yes, that's what that says. When are you coming? Now, what you'll notice is it's kind of interesting that she chooses the Y there, right? But when you literally say the name of the letter Y, it starts with a W sound, W, right? Y, just like in the word when or whatever. So when they're thinking of the W sound, they're thinking of the letter Y because of the name of the letter Y. So, and the letter N, when you say the letter N, you hear N, right? So that's what they're hearing. And so it doesn't not necessarily match up exactly like what you're thinking, but you'll notice that for every letter that she wrote here, see, when are you coming? It's like the main sounds that you can hear in the word. And so it kind of makes sense how they spelled it if you get into kind of the mind of someone at this stage. They're starting to learn how to segment those different sounds, those different phonemes in the word. And they're not getting every one of them, but they're getting a lot more than they were. So that's at the early part of this stage. That's how you can kind of tell the difference when they move from that emergent stage to this letter name alphabetic stage. It's really when they start demonstrating that idea of the alphabetic principle, that they realize that words can be segmented into these separate sounds spelled from left to right, and that those letters represent the sounds and that kind of thing. So that's kind of the transition, if you will. Now let's look at one. This is still letter name alphabetic stage, but you can see this is a lot more advanced than the previous one. I'll read it for you in case you're struggling with it. It says, I will miss you. I really don't want you to leave. I love you so much, but I hope you have a great time. This is a letter from a first grader to her teacher at the end of the school year. Now, what I love about this, what makes sense about this is in the letter name alphabetic stage, it's kind of like, excuse me, it's kind of like, why don't we spell it that way? It makes sense. Hang on, I got a call. So when a child's spelling at this stage, you'll notice they have some high frequency words that they know how to spell, like I and will and you. And then the words that they're having to decode and figure out how to spell, like leave, it makes sense. If we only have that alphabetic layer, all the sounds are represented, right? Why don't we spell leave, L-E-V? It's because we have that pattern layer to our language, and we have the meaning layer to our language. We have those 3 levels to our English orthography. And these letter name alphabetic spellers are still at that very basic level. They're spelling very, what I call concretely. It makes sense. Like, why don't we spell leave, L-E-V? The L should say L, the E should say E, and the V should say V. It makes sense. Look at the word really. Really. 4 sounds, 4 letters. Why don't we spell it that way? It makes sense. Hope, H-O-P. That totally makes sense at the alphabetic layer because the H sound, the H makes the H sound, the O makes an O sound, the P makes a P sound, right? Hope, hope. But what we get is we have to have that pattern layer that says to make that a long vowel, we have to have a silent E. But they're not there yet. They're still spelling things at a very literal level, very concretely. So great. Great. Makes sense, right? Time, T-I-M. Why don't we spell them that way? It's because we don't just spell everything at the alphabetic level, but they're developing to a point where right now that's all they understand is to spell each sound they hear with a letter, and they don't understand the patterns. That comes later. Okay, so now this is the next stage. This is stage 3, and this one might be a little more difficult to read. I'll give you a minute to look at it. It says, my team won the soccer game. I was the ball girl. We had to use cones for the goal. Every time the ball went downhill, I had to throw them another ball. This is what we call the early within word pattern stage. Stage 3 is called within word pattern. And at the early part of this stage, what you might notice different from the previous stage, the alphabetic stage, is that they're starting to use these more advanced kind of spelling features. Before, they would have spelled team, T-E-M. Now they're still spelling it wrong, but they realize it needs something else to make that long vowel. They're using the silent E rule. So there's a lot of using but confusing. They're trying, they know it needs something else. They just don't know what it is yet. Goal. In before, I think I've got a comparison. Yeah. Before, they would have probably spelled goal, G-O-L. Now they realize that's not going to make it have the long O, so they're trying all these different spelling patterns. They just don't know how to do it yet. And so you'll see a lot of mix mash, like in the word throw here. They've put the O-W plus the silent E. So here you can see how it's very literal at the letter name alphabetic stage. But when they transition over to the early, into the word within word pattern stage, they're starting to use more advanced spelling features, like the silent E, like the digraphs and diphthongs and all kinds of things like that. So that's how you can see the difference, that transition over there. It makes sense, doesn't it? This is an example of a level 4, the stage, the 4th stage, which is called the syllables and affixes stage. And at this stage, you can see that they are spelling a lot of the words correctly. And I forgot to point this out earlier, but you notice that when they transitioned from the early letter name alphabetic into the later letter name alphabetic, you remember they quit using all capital letters, right? So hopefully you're noticing this handwriting improvement as we go through these stages. Now you're seeing the handwriting's really becoming more proficient, and they're able to spell almost all of the single vowel words correctly. They can spell a lot of words they use in their everyday life, their high frequency words. They're spelling those correctly. The things that you're going to see at the syllables and affixes stage is they don't really understand these rules about for multi-syllable words. So if they have things like doubling the consonant before you're adding an ending, like in summer and stopped, or little, the EL or the LE, how many times have we gotten the Christmas card from the little angle instead of the little angel because they didn't know EL, LE. More advanced words like national parks and things like the dropping the E before the adding ing or those kinds of things. Those are kind of things that they don't know how to spell yet, but they're becoming more and more proficient on their spelling. There's just still things they don't know how to do. I can't tell you how many times I've had kids, students of mine say, gosh, they're a terrible speller when they're looking at their writing. And they're not a terrible speller. That's just where they are developmentally. And they're spelling it the way it makes sense. It's just a progression, and we all move through these stages, and we move through these stages at a different pace. Not everyone gets through these stages at the same time, and so that's something to keep in mind also. And probably the stage that they'll spend the least amount of time in is in the letter name alphabetic stage. They'll move through that stage pretty quickly into the within word pattern stage. And then syllables and affixes is the 4th stage. Then this last stage, the 5th stage, is what we call derivational relation stage. This is out of a 6th grade math journal here, this example. It's not uncommon for students at the previous stage to be 8 to 12-year-olds at the syllables and affixes, but when they get to this stage, it's more like middle school, high school, and even into college. So this is the last stage, the 5th stage. You'll notice they're writing in cursive. You're noticing they're real close on a lot of their spelling. The things they're missing would be helpful if they thought about it from the root word, like favor. They would know that needed to stay in O. Something like the challenging, they got almost right. They left out a letter probably because they didn't hear it when they enunciated it. Different, this is kind of the way we say the word different. Although if we thought about the root different, it would help us to put that E in there. So it's things like that. It's learning the Greek and Latin roots and those kinds of things. And so this is the most advanced stage of spelling development. So hopefully that helps you to get a sense of those 5 spelling stages of development. We all go through them. We just don't go through them at the same rate. Some kids will fly through them a little faster than typical, and others might take a little longer than others, but eventually we all get through them. Okay. So hopefully that's a little helpful reminder to you about the spelling stages of development. And if you want to know more about how to assess your child for those spelling stages, then watch one of the other videos on how to use the Words Their Way qualitative spelling assessment by Bear, Invernizzi, Templeton, and Johnston in order to identify those stages in your own child. Okay, thanks for watching.